I have been walking around my house before, like doing stuff at home, doing whatever, and I notice myself and I'll be doing a bit of this, and I'll be floating about, and I'm not even really shadow boxing. I don't know what it is. Like, I hope other people have done it, and I'm not just looking silly now. So, in this video, I'm talking about shadow boxing, and in my opinion, there's only 3 sort of errors that you could do with shadow boxing, not necessarily mistakes, because people talk about doing mistakes in shadow boxing and that, but in my opinion, shadow boxing is a time where you're not necessarily making mistakes, but it's the best time to try new things out, maybe trying out new techniques you're not really used to doing, as much new movement, because it's the safest time to do it. But having said that, if you're, say, throwing a jab and your hand's coming down, you bring it back up, and you keep doing that in your shadow boxing, that is a mistake. But is that a mistake when you're doing your shadow boxing, or is that a mistake throwing a jab? Because you're still going to do that even when you hit the heavy bag. So the first thing you need to be doing, which I say is an error, is, if you're not doing this, is either recording yourself when you're shadow boxing, or making sure you're shadow boxing down the gym in front of trainers. Now, I'm not saying do this all the time. You don't need to do this all the time. But as long as you now and again record yourself, you'll notice if you're dropping that jab. So you'll notice to bring it up and bring it straight back to your face rather than looping it round and dropping it. That's just one example. But like I said, shadow boxing's a time when you can practice your stuff, practice your footwork and your movement. So it's not necessarily mistakes with techniques, because you'd still be doing it against a heavy bag. But again, having said that, you do want to try and make sure you have got good technique. The second error, which I think a lot of people do with their shadow boxing, which they should try and get out the habit of doing, and that is just constantly, I bet you probably won't spot it unless I say about it, but it's just constantly throwing offence instead of practicing defence. I definitely think shadow boxing should be practiced your defence a lot more, especially if you're doing MMA, your spools, your checking, your head movement. Again, if you're not great at slipping or got good head movement, this is the time to practice it. Practice it in shadow boxing, and then again, when you're recording yourself or doing it in the mirror, you'll be able to see yourself mistakes you're making. If you're slipping and dropping a certain hand, or you're slipping a bit awkwardly out of the way rather than stepping in and slipping correctly, you should be able to spot that. If not, a trainer should be able to spot that. So again, they all sort of revert to number 1, which is the most important one. It's just basically making sure that your trainer is watching you do it. But like I said, if you're making a silly mistake by dropping your hands and things like that, it's bad, but as long as you're still practicing and running through the techniques, because that's what shadow boxing is about. It's about you practicing and that. But that's why this one really irritates me, because you don't see people practicing defence enough, in my opinion. Not always, some people do, but I know I've been one for doing bad habits with that and not practicing my defence enough. Especially if you're trying to visualise your opponent, you need to practice thinking, right, I'm going to step in, jab, cross, now step back out, or step in, jab, cross, he comes with a counter so I can block, then hook or check, whatever it's going to be in the scenario in your head, but try and visualise it and try and make sure you're practicing your blocking. Even if you're not that keen on visualising, just think, right, whoa, I've been throwing a lot of offence, I've not practiced my defence for a bit, so I've got to practice covering up, I've got to practice pulling back, practicing your blocking. So, and this moves me on to the last one, which is my biggest pet hate with shadow boxing, And again, admittedly, I must admit, I have done it. And that is doing this. Lazy shadow boxing. Lazy shadow boxing. Now, I have been walking around my house before, like doing stuff at home, do whatever, and I notice myself and I'll be doing a bit of this, and I'll be floating about, and I'm not even really shadow boxing. I don't know what it is. Like, I hope other people have done it, and I'm not just looking silly now, but you do see people, you do notice yourself, even when I used to work on building sites and that, I've noticed myself do silly little things like little hand movements and that. But again, it's not really necessarily shadow boxing. I'm obviously just thinking in my head about things and I'm just animating it with my hands. But when you're down the gym and you're working and they're doing 3 rounds of shadow boxing, say, and you're just sitting there doing this, people say about picking up bad habits. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I've even seen really good fighters who've got really brilliant technique doing this lazy shadow boxing. But for me, it's not bad habit necessarily what they're going to pick up. It's just pointless of doing it. If you're down here and you're down the gym and you're in that moment, you don't always get a lot of time to train anyway, especially if you're not complete full-time professional and you don't have day jobs or other commitments. You're only going to be maybe training a couple of hours in a day, if that. Some people only train an hour in a day. So you need to make it worth it. Now, if you're shadow boxing, a lot of the times you're doing it to warm up. So if you're just doing that, you're not going to be warming up. So that's why you want to make sure that you're up, you're on point, you're not being lazy with your shadow boxing. No point just coming in and just doing all that and just going through the motion. Go through the motion properly. Keep them hands up, keep nice and sharp. Practice your blocking, practice your head movement, you're moving about. So they're just sitting there, just being sort of lazy with it. Again, I suppose you could pick up bad habits if you're a beginner, but that's not the thing what drives me mad with it. I think it's just laziness. And admittedly, like I said, I've done it before. I'm not always the biggest fan of shadow boxing. I'd much rather hit the bag or do something like that, even though I do think shadow boxing is important. Just because I think it's important, it's not necessarily always my favourite exercise to do, but it is a perfect exercise for boxing because you could do it anywhere, or I say boxing, MMA, whatever. You could do it anywhere, and it's a brilliant warm-up. There is so many positives of doing it. So if you're going to do it, you might as well do it correctly and not do it lazy. So basically, the 3 points to take away from this video. Make sure that someone is watching your shadow boxing, whether it's you recording yourself or a trainer. Not necessarily all the time, but then that way you will not pick up any bad habits. Number 2, make sure you're practicing your offense rather than just your defense. Your defense rather than your offense, that's it. Basically making sure you're blocking and that as well. Don't just always thinking strike. Making sure you're practicing, you're blocking your head movement, you're checking if you're doing your Muay Thai, your spalls if you're doing MMA. Make sure you're practicing them. And the last one, like we were just talking about, just make sure if you're going to do it, you're going to do it properly. If you enjoyed this video, thanks for watching. If you want to see a shadow boxing workout, then check out these videos over here. And I'll see you all soon. Don't forget to subscribe and smash the thumbs up as well.